The blood still freezes in my veins when I think back to that fateful mission to Mexico. It was supposed to be just a few more days of reconnaissance in a remote area close to the Guatemalan border. None of us could have imagined the horror that awaited us in the depths of those ancient caves. I was a sergeant in the Mexican Air Force, part of a special unit assigned to covert operations. Our team consisted of 6 highly trained men, all veterans of countless missions, but nothing in our experience could have prepared us for what we would find in that underground labyrinth. It all started with reports of suspicious activity in the area. Locals talked about strange lights in the sky and unexplained sounds coming from underground. The High Command suspected traffickers using underground routes, but they wanted to be sure. Our mission was clear: infiltrate, investigate, and report back. It was as simple as that, or at least it should be. On the night of our arrival, we camped at the base of a mountain full of limestone formations. The air was heavy, charged with an inexplicable tension. I remember looking up at the starry sky, feeling as if something was watching us from the shadows. I shook my head, pushing those thoughts away. We were soldiers, trained to deal with the unknown. Irrational fears had no place in our mission. With the first ray of sunshine, we entered the main cave. The smell of mold and decay hit us immediately. Our flashlights cut through the darkness, revealing grotesque rock formations that seemed to contort as we advanced. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the sound of our breathing and the occasional drip of water. After hours of exploration, we reached an immense chamber. Our beams of light barely reached the ceiling, getting lost in the vastness above. It was then that we noticed the first anomalies. Strange inscriptions covered the walls, symbols that bore no resemblance to any known writing. They seemed to pulsate with an energy of their own, as if they were alive. "What the hell is that?" muttered Rodriguez, our communications expert. His voice echoed through the chamber, reverberating unnaturally. Before anyone could answer, a tremor shook the ground. Stones came loose from the ceiling, forcing us to seek shelter. When the dust cleared, we realized that the wall at the back had broken, revealing a hidden passage. Captain Ramirez, our leader, hesitated for the first time since the start of the mission. His eyes revealed an internal conflict between duty and a primitive instinct for self-preservation. Finally, military discipline prevailed. "Let's check it out," he ordered, his voice betraying a hint of apprehension. As we approached the newly formed opening, a gust of fetid air hit us. It was an alien smell, a mixture of sulfur and decaying organics. My stomach churned, and I realized I wasn't the only one affected. Even the always stoic Lieutenant Vargas looked pale. The passage narrowed rapidly, forcing us to continue in single file. The air grew thicker with every step, laden with a sticky dampness that seemed to cling to our skin. The walls oozed a viscous, phosphorescent substance, providing a faint, greenish illumination. After what seemed like an eternity in that claustrophobic tunnel, we emerged into another chamber. But this one was different. The floor was covered in a kind of bioluminescent moss, pulsating in a rhythm reminiscent of a heartbeat. In the center stood a structure that defied logic, a crystalline mass that seemed to float centimeters off the ground, emitting a low, constant hum. "My God," whispered someone behind me. It wasn't just the strange formations that shocked us. Scattered across the ground, we saw skeletons, some human, others something completely different. Creatures with bone structures that didn't belong to any known species. Captain Ramirez approached the crystalline structure, mesmerized by its pulsating glow. I tried to warn him, but the words stuck in my throat. When he touched the surface of the crystal, a flash of light momentarily blinded us. When I regained my sight, I saw with horror that Ramirez was lying on the ground, convulsing violently. We ran to help him, but as we got close, he stood up abruptly. His eyes had changed. The irises were now vertical, like those of a reptile. "Captain," I called out hesitantly. He turned to me, an inhuman smile spreading across his face. "They're coming," he said in a voice that was no longer his own. "The old ones are returning." Before we could react, Ramirez attacked. His movements were inhumanly fast, his fingers now ending in sharp claws. Rodriguez was the first to fall, his throat torn out in seconds. Chaos ensued. Shots echoed through the cave as we tried to subdue our former captain, but he seemed immune to the bullets, regenerating instantly. In the midst of the confusion, I noticed that the moss on the ground was starting to move, crawling towards us as if it had a life of its own. Panic seized me. I shouted for us to retreat, but it was too late. I watched in horror as Vargas stumbled and fell. The moss enveloped him in seconds, penetrating his skin. His screams of agony still haunt my nightmares. I don't know how I managed to escape from that hellish chamber. The next few hours were a blur of dark corridors, distant screams, and the constant feeling of being chased. When I finally emerged onto the surface, I was alone and on the verge of madness. In the days that followed, I tried to report what had happened to my superiors. I was met with disbelief and accusations of cowardice and desertion. The mission was officially declared a failure. My companions reported missing in action. But I know the truth. Something ancient and terrible has awakened in those caves, and I fear that this is only the beginning of a threat that humanity is not prepared to face. Now, as I write this, I can't help but wonder, how long do we have before they come to the surface? And when they do, will we be ready for what awaits us in the shadows? The weight of those memories haunts me day and night. Sometimes I wake up screaming, my body drenched in cold sweat, the images of that hellish cave still vivid in my mind. But I can't afford to succumb to the trauma, not when I know that the danger we encountered is far from over. In the weeks that followed my desperate escape, I was subjected to intense interrogations. The high command of the Mexican Air Force was determined to extract every detail of the failed mission. Sitting in a sterile room, under the implacable gaze of senior officers and military psychologists, I tried to explain the inexplicable. "Repeat one more time, Sergeant." Colonel Mendoza's monotone voice echoed through the interrogation room. "What exactly happened to your team?" I swallowed, my eyes scanning the skeptical faces around me. How could I explain the horror I had witnessed without sounding completely insane? "Sir, as I reported earlier, we found something in the caves, something that shouldn't exist." My voice trembled slightly. "Captain Ramirez was the first to be affected. He transformed, became something inhuman." The silence that followed was oppressive. I could feel the judgment in their gazes, the palpable disbelief in the air. "Sergeant," the military psychologist, Dr. Alvarez, leaned forward, his tone condescending. "We understand that the experience was traumatic, but you need to understand how your allegations sound." Frustration and anger bubbled up inside me. "Doctor, with all due respect, I know what I saw. My companions, they're not simply missing. They've been transformed, infected by something we don't understand." Colonel Mendoza exchanged a meaningful glance with Dr. Alvarez before turning to me. "Sergeant, your dedication to duty is admirable, but I fear that the stress of the mission may have affected your perception of reality." At that moment, I realized that no matter how much I insisted, they would never believe me. For the high command, it was easier to label me as traumatized or worse, as a cowardly deserter, than to accept the terrifying truth I brought. I was put on compulsory medical leave, subjected to daily therapy sessions and psychological evaluation. But while they tried to cure my supposed mental instability, I knew that every second lost was an advantage for the threat that lurked in the depths. During sleepless nights, I started researching. I immersed myself in ancient legends, conspiracy theories, and obscure accounts of unexplained events. Slowly, a pattern began to emerge. Stories of reptilian creatures, underground civilizations, and technologies beyond human comprehension. Everything pointed to something bigger, older, and infinitely more dangerous than I could have imagined. A month after my return, I received an unexpected visit. It was late at night when urgent knocks echoed through my apartment door. Cautious, I opened it to find a hooded figure. "May I come in?" "We don't have much time." The voice was familiar, but I couldn't immediately identify it. Hesitantly, I allowed him in. When the figure removed the hood, my heart almost stopped. It was Elena Fuentes, a scientist who worked for the government on classified projects. "Elena, what are you doing here?" Her eyes were wide, a mixture of fear and urgency on her face. "I read your report, the one they tried to bury. You're not crazy, Sergeant. What you saw is real, and it's just the tip of the iceberg." My whole body tensed up. Finally, someone who believed me, but the relief was quickly replaced by a sense of dread. If Elena was here, taking risks to find me, the situation must be even worse than I had imagined. "What do you know?" I asked, my voice little more than a whisper. Elena took a USB stick out of her pocket, her hands shaking slightly. "Everything is here. Old records, secret experiments, unexplained sightings. For decades, maybe centuries, they've been among us, watching, waiting." "They? You mean the Reptilians?" Elena added, her gaze intense, "or at least that's what we call them. An ancient, technologically advanced race that has been manipulating human history since the shadows." My mind spun with the implications. The memories of the cave, the symbols on the walls, the horrible transformation of my companions. It was all starting to make terrible sense. "Why now?" I asked, more to myself than to Elena. "Why are they revealing themselves now?" Elena shook her head, frustration evident in her voice. "We don't know for sure, but we believe that what you and your team found in that cave was some kind of portal or awakening technology. You may have inadvertently triggered something they've been waiting for millennia." A shiver ran down my spine. The guilt I already bore for the fate of my companions now seemed to multiply exponentially. We had opened a Pandora's box, and the world had no idea of the horror that was about to be unleashed. "What can we do?" I asked, feeling simultaneously determined and completely lost. Elena handed me the pen drive, her touch lingering for a moment. "First, we need to gather allies. There are others like us, people who know the truth and are willing to fight. But we have to be careful. We don't know how far their influence extends." At that moment, a noise from the corridor made us freeze. Heavy footsteps were approaching my door. Elena paled. "They followed me," she whispered, panic evident in her voice. "We can't let them get this information." I quickly hid the USB stick in a secret compartment I had installed in my apartment a few days after my return. I barely had time to close the hiding place when the door was violently kicked in. Masked men burst into the apartment, their guns pointed at us, but there was something wrong with them. Their movements were too fluid, almost inhuman, and their eyes, behind the masks, I could glimpse the same reptilian look I saw on Captain Ramirez that fateful night in the cave. "Elena, run!" I shouted, throwing myself at the invaders in a desperate attempt to buy time. Chaos ensued. Furniture was overturned. Gunshots echoed through the apartment. In the midst of the confusion, I saw Elena escape through the back window. At least she was safe, I thought, as I fought against forces that clearly overcame me. The last thought I had before I felt a sharp pain in the back of my head and the world went dark was, this is only the beginning of the war, and humanity doesn't even know it's under attack. The darkness enveloped me like a suffocating cloak. I don't know how long I was unconscious, but when I finally opened my eyes, I wished I hadn't. The atmosphere around me was nightmarish. My surroundings were a nightmare come true. I was in a kind of bioorganic chamber, the walls pulsing with a greenish light, resembling veins under translucent skin. The air was thick with an acrid smell that made my eyes water. I tried to move, only to find that I was trapped in a structure that seemed to fuse metal and living flesh. "Welcome back, Sergeant." A familiar but distorted voice echoed through the chamber. Forcing my blurred vision, I recognized the approaching figure. It was Colonel Mendoza, the same one who had interrogated me weeks ago. But now his face was different. His skin looked more scaly, his eyes definitely reptilian. "Colonel," my voice came out hoarse, almost unrecognizable. What's going on?" A cold smile spread across the colonel's face, revealing teeth too sharp to be human. "Oh, Sergeant, did you really think you could expose our secrets and get away with it? You have no idea how much you facilitated our plans." My heart raced. Elena's words echoed in my mind. The infiltration was deeper than we had imagined. "Why?" I managed to ask, fighting against the rising panic. "Why now? What do you want?" Mendoza, or the thing that now occupied his body, approached, his eyes shining with an ancient and cruel intelligence. "You want to know why now? Because you humans have finally reached a point where you can be useful. Centuries of subtle manipulation, guiding the development of your technology, shaping your societies, all leading up to this moment." He made a broad gesture, and only then did I notice that we weren't alone in the chamber. Other creatures moved in the shadows, some still partly human in appearance, others completely alien. "You are parasites!" I spat the words, anger momentarily overcoming fear. The creature that was Mendoza laughed, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. "Parasites? No, Sergeant. We are the true heirs of this planet. We were here long before your ancestors crawled out of the ocean, and now we're simply claiming what is rightfully ours." As he spoke, I noticed movement to my right. With horror, I saw what looked like an organic cocoon open up. From within emerged a figure I recognized instantly, Captain Ramirez. But he was changed. His skin had a greenish tinge, his eyes were completely reptilian. "Ramirez," I whispered, a mixture of relief and dread coming over me. He turned towards me, but there was no recognition in his eyes, just a cold indifference. Mendoza noticed my reaction. "Ah, yes, your former captain, an excellent addition to our ranks. You'll be joining him soon." Panic completely overwhelmed me. "No, I'll never become one of you." "You have no choice, then, Sergeant," Mendoza said, his voice now charged with a supernatural authority. "The process already began the moment you entered that cave. We're just speeding things up." At that instant, I felt something move under my skin, a sharp pain, as if thousands of microscopic needles were penetrating every pore of my body. I screamed, but the sound that came from my throat was no longer human. "Don't fight it," Mendoza whispered, almost tenderly. "Embrace your evolution." Through the haze of pain and horror, my mind struggled to hold on to something, anything that could keep me human. I thought of Elena, of the USB stick hidden in my apartment. There were people out there who knew the truth, who would fight this threat. With a superhuman effort, I managed to focus my thoughts. You won't win," I gasped. "Humanity will fight." Mendoza tilted his head, as if genuinely puzzled. "Fight? Against what? Against whom? We're everywhere. Sergeant, in governments, in corporations, in the armed forces. By the time humanity realizes what is happening, it will be too late." As he spoke, I felt my consciousness begin to fragment. Memories, emotions, and thoughts blended together in a chaotic whirlwind. I was losing track of who I was. In a final flash of lucidity, I realized something crucial. Mendoza and the others were overconfident. They were underestimating human resilience, our ability to overcome the impossible. With my last remaining strength, I looked Mendoza straight in the eye. "You're wrong," I managed to say. "We are stronger than you think." For a brief moment, I saw something flash across the creature's face. Doubt? I didn't have time to analyze it, because in the next instant, the pain intensified to unimaginable levels. My vision went dark, but before I lost consciousness completely, I had one last vision. I don't know if it was real or a hallucination caused by the transformation, but I saw Elena. She was somewhere dark, surrounded by computer screens, working frantically. On one of the screens, I recognized symbols similar to the ones we saw in the cave. Then everything went black. I don't know how much time passed, days, weeks. The notion of time seemed to have lost its meaning. When I finally regained some consciousness, I felt different. My body responded in strange ways. My senses were heightened to impossible levels. But something was wrong, or rather, something was right. Despite the physical changes, my mind remained my own, fragmented, confused, but still human. I opened my eyes, expecting to see the bioorganic chamber, but it was somewhere else, a metal room, cold and sterile, and I wasn't alone. "Welcome back, Sergeant," said a familiar voice. Eleanor was there, alongside other figures I didn't recognize. "We managed to rescue you in time." I tried to speak, but my new physiology wouldn't cooperate. Eleanor seemed to understand my confusion. "Don't worry," she said, a tired smile on her face. "You've been through a lot, but now you can be our greatest weapon against them. You're living proof that we can resist the transformation." As I absorbed her words, a realization hit me. The war against the Reptilians had only just begun, and I, half man, half alien, was at the center of it. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. The battle for Earth and for humanity itself would be long and brutal, and I was determined to fight it to the end. Adapting to my new body was a slow and painful process. Every movement, every breath, was a constant reminder of what I had become, half human, half reptile. A freak born of the horror we faced in the depths of that cursed cave. Elena and her team of scientists and military dissidents kept me in a secret underground facility. The grey concrete walls and fluorescent lights were a stark contrast to the organic chamber where I underwent my transformation. Here, at least, I felt more human. "Your physiology is fascinating," commented Dr. Hernandez, a brilliant geneticist who was leading the studies on my condition. Her eyes shone with a mixture of compassion and scientific curiosity as she examined the results of yet another battery of tests. "You've kept your human consciousness, but you've acquired extraordinary abilities." I knew what she was talking about. My strength had increased exponentially. My senses were heightened to superhuman levels. And most disturbingly, I could feel a tenuous psychic connection with the real Reptilians. "Doctor?" My voice still sounded strange to my ears, a soft hiss overlapping the words. "How long before I lose control?" Dr. Hernandez exchanged a quick glance with Elena before answering. "Honestly, we don't know. You're one of a kind, Sergeant, the first successful hybrid who has kept his humanity. Every day that passes is uncharted territory." Eleanor moved closer, placing a comforting hand on my scaly shoulder. "That's why we need to act fast. You're our best chance against them." I nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of that responsibility. "What have you found out about their plans?" Elena activated a holographic screen in the center of the room. Satellite images, confidential documents, and complex diagrams filled the air around us. "Thanks to the information we managed to extract from you during your transformation and the data on the USB stick, we've put together a partial picture," she explained, her voice tense. "The Reptilians are planning a large-scale takeover. They will use a combination of alien technology and social manipulation to subjugate humanity." Dr. Hernandez intervened, pointing to a global map dotted with red lights. "These are the locations where we have detected anomalous activity consistent with reptilian technology. We believe they are access points for their underground network." I studied the map, my military mind analyzing patterns and strategies. "They're positioning themselves for a coordinated attack," I concluded, the realization hitting me like a punch in the gut. Elena nodded somberly. "Exactly, and we have reason to believe that the attack will begin soon. Weeks, maybe days." The weight of the situation was overwhelming. Billions of innocent lives, the whole of human civilization, were at risk. And I, a half-man, half-reptile freak, was possibly humanity's only hope. "What's the plan?" I asked, my determination overcoming fear and uncertainty. Elena smiled, a glimmer of hope in her tired eyes. "We're going to strike at the heart of their operation. Thanks to your psychic connection, you can guide us to the Reptilian Command Center." The thought of plunging back into that nightmare made my blood run cold, but I knew there was no choice. "When do we leave?" "Tomorrow at dawn," Elena replied. "Get some rest. You'll need all your strength." That night, alone in my sterile room, I was plagued by vivid nightmares, visions of a world dominated by the Reptilians, humans enslaved and transformed into mindless hybrids. In the midst of the chaos, I saw familiar faces, my teammates, Captain Ramirez, even Colonel Mendoza in his human form. They all stared at me with silent accusation, as if I were responsible for their fate. I woke up bathed in sweat, my heart beating frantically. For a moment, I didn't recognize my own reflection in the mirror. Vertical eyes, slightly greenish skin, features that oscillated between human and reptilian. "I'm still me," I whispered to myself, a mantra that had become my anchor to sanity. "I'm still human inside." Dawn came too quickly. Our team, a mix of elite soldiers and armed scientists, gathered in the underground hangar. The air was charged with tension and anticipation. Elena handed me a special uniform, designed to adapt to my unique physiology. "Are you ready?" she asked, her eyes searching mine. I swallowed, feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders. "I have to be," I replied. We boarded a stealth transport, cutting-edge technology mixed with alien reverse engineering. As we took off, I concentrated on the tenuous psychic connection I shared with the Reptilians. It was like tuning into a cosmic radio, searching for the right frequency amid the static of the universe. Suddenly, an eerie clarity came over me. I could feel, no, I could see, the vast underground network of the Reptilians spreading out beneath our feet. And at the center of it all, a pulse of energy that could only be their command core. There, I pointed to a spot on the digital map. "That's where we need to go." Elena nodded, transmitting the coordinates to the pilot. As we approached our destination, a feeling of déjà vu came over me. The terrain below was strangely familiar. With a shiver of recognition, I realized where we were. It was the same place where it all began, where my team and I had entered that fateful cave months ago. "They were right under our noses the whole time," I muttered, the irony of the situation not escaping me. We landed at a safe distance, our team moving silently through the dense vegetation. The entrance to the cave loomed before us, a dark mouth that seemed to beckon us into the depths. As we prepared to enter, Elena approached me. "Remember," she said softly, "no matter what happens in there, you're one of us, a human. Don't let them make you doubt that." I nodded, grateful for her words. With one last look at the sky, possibly the last sky I would ever see, I led our team into the darkness. The air inside the cave was oppressive, charged with memories and terror. Every step took us deeper into the heart of enemy territory. My hybrid senses were on high alert, picking up sounds and smells imperceptible to the humans around me. Then I felt it. An overwhelming presence. An ancient and powerful mind that reached out to mine. The voice in my head was familiar and terrifying. "Welcome back, Sergeant. We've been expecting you." With a shudder, I realized that our rescue mission had turned into something much more dangerous. We were walking straight into a trap, and I had inadvertently led everyone into it. The battle for Earth was about to begin, and I was at the epicenter of it all. The air in the cave became even denser, as if the atmosphere itself was impregnated with malevolence. My hybrid senses picked up vibrations and smells that my human companions couldn't even imagine. Every fiber of my being screamed danger. "Elena," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "It's a trap. They know we're here." She nodded gravely, her eyes scanning the shadows around us. "I suspected it might be, but we have no choice now. We need to move on." We advanced cautiously, our weapons in hand. The tunnel began to widen, revealing rock formations that seemed to pulsate with a greenish inner light. It was as if the cave itself was alive. Suddenly, a high-pitched scream cut through the silence. One of our soldiers, young Corporal Rodriguez, fell to his knees, clutching his head in agony. "They're in my mind," he shouted, his eyes wide with terror. Before we could react, Rodriguez stood up abruptly, his movements erratic and inhuman. His eyes, now with vertical pupils, stared at us with an alien coldness. "Get down!" I shouted, pushing Elena to the ground just as Rodriguez opened fire on us. Chaos ensued. Gunshots echoed off the cave walls, mixed with screams of pain and confusion. I saw with horror that it wasn't just Rodriguez. Other members of our team were starting to turn on us. their faces contorted into expressions that were no longer human. "It's some kind of mind control," shouted Dr. Hernandez, taking cover behind a rock formation. "They're using reptilian technology to corrupt our minds." My heart raced. That was why I was still conscious. My hybrid physiology made me immune to the reptilians' direct mind control. "Elena," I called out in the midst of the chaos. "We have to get to the command center. It's our only chance of stopping them." She nodded, her eyes determined despite her obvious fear. "Lead the way, we'll cover you." With one last look at my companions fighting their own fellow converts, I plunged deeper into the cave. My reptilian instincts guided me ever closer to the beating heart of that subterranean nightmare. Finally, I reached a colossal chamber. In the center stood a structure that defied comprehension, a pulsating crystalline mass, surrounded by technology that seemed to fuse the organic and the mechanical. And there, in front of the structure, was him, Colonel Mendoza, or what had once been him. His form was now completely reptilian, imposing and terrifying. "Ah, Sergeant," his voice echoed in my mind more than in the air. "You don't disappoint, so predictable in your foolish bravado." I raised my gun, but before I could fire, an invisible force knocked it out of my hands. Mendoza laughed, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. "Your primitive weapons are useless here. You're at the heart of our power now." "Why?" I shouted, my voice charged with anger and frustration. "Why do all this? Why not just destroy us?" Mendoza's eyes shone with an ancient, cruel intelligence. "Destroy? Oh no. You humans are too valuable to waste. Your minds, your bodies, are the perfect substrate for our evolution." He made a broad gesture, and holographic images filled the air around us. I saw entire cities being transformed, humans turning into hybrids like me, the entire planet changing to accommodate the new reptilian order. "See?" Mendoza continued. "It's not destruction, it's transcendence. And you, my dear Sergeant, will be the herald of this new era." I felt something move in my mind, as if invisible claws were trying to grab my thoughts. I fell to my knees, fighting against the psychic invasion. "Don't resist." Mendoza's voice was now a seductive whisper in my consciousness. "Embrace your true nature. Join us." Images of power, of a future where I would rule alongside the reptilians, flooded my mind. It was tempting, so tempting. But then, amidst the whirlwind of alien visions, I saw faces. Elena, Dr. Hernandez, my teammates. All the people who were fighting and dying at this very moment to stop this invasion. "No," I shouted, both in my mind and out loud. With a superhuman effort, I repelled the psychic attack. Mendoza stepped back, surprised. "Impossible. How did you—" I stood up, staggering but determined. "You're wrong, Mendoza. Our humanity is not a weakness. It's our greatest strength." At that moment, Elena and the survivors from our team burst into the chamber, weapons in hand. "Sergeant," Elena shouted, "the central device. It's the source of the mind control." I understood immediately. With a roar that was both human and reptilian, I launched myself towards the crystalline structure in the center of the room. Mendoza, sensing my intention, tried to stop me, but I was faster, stronger. My hybrid nature, which he saw as an advantage for his side, now turned against him. I hit the crystal with all my strength. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a deafening sound, cracks began to spread across its surface. "No!" Mendoza shouted, his voice filled with despair. The structure imploded, releasing a wave of energy that threw us all to the ground. I felt as if my mind was being torn apart and rebuilt in an instant. When I finally managed to get up, I saw that Mendoza and the other reptilians were lying there, apparently unconscious. Elena and our team were regrouping, looks of confusion and relief on their faces. "Is it over?" someone asked hesitantly. I looked down at my hands, still scaly, still hybrid. "No," I replied, my voice laden with determination. "That was just the beginning. As alarm sirens began to sound and more soldiers, human and reptilian, converged on our location, I realized that the real battle for Earth was just beginning. And I, neither fully human nor fully alien, was at the center of it all. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Humanity would not go down without a fight. And I would be there, on the front line, protecting the world that, despite my transformation, I still called home. Daylight never seemed brighter than the moment we emerged from that hellish cave. Fresh air filled my lungs, a bittersweet reminder of my enduring humanity. I looked at my fellow survivors, their faces exhausted but determined. Elena was by my side, her presence an anchor amidst the chaos we had faced. "What now?" asked Dr. Hernandez, his voice trembling slightly. Before I could answer, the sound of helicopters cut through the air. Dozens of them appeared on the horizon, their military insignia gleaming in the morning sun. "Reinforcements?" asked one of the soldiers, hope tinging his voice. Elena frowned, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. "Maybe. Or maybe it's the next phase of their plan." My hybrid senses sharpened, picking up radio frequencies that human ears couldn't perceive. "They're not friends," I warned, my body tense, ready for action. "They're here to contain the situation, and we're part of what needs to be contained." "Damn it!" exclaimed Elena. "We need to disperse, find allies, spread the truth." I nodded, the reality of our situation weighing heavily on me. We were few against an enemy that had infiltrated the highest levels of global power. Our victory in the cave was significant, but the war was far from over. "Listen," I said, facing each of the survivors. "What we face today is only the beginning. The Reptilians are still out there, regrouping, planning their next move. We can't let the world remain in ignorance." Elena took a device from her pocket, an encrypted data transmitter. "All the evidence we've collected is here. We need to disclose it, but carefully. If we act rashly, we'll be labeled as crazy or terrorists." Dr. Hernandez stepped forward, his eyes shining with determination from behind his stained glasses. "I have contacts in the international scientific community. I can start spreading the information, disguised as theoretical research. Plant the seeds of truth." "Good," I agreed. "In the meantime, we need to find others like us. Other hybrids who have managed to keep their humanity. They will be crucial to fighting the Reptilians at their own game." The helicopters were approaching quickly. We didn't have much time. "We'll split up into small groups," I instructed. "Keep in touch through the secure channels we've established. And remember, no matter what happens, don't give up hope. Humanity has survived countless challenges throughout history. We will survive this one too." As the group prepared to disperse, Elena approached me, her eyes searching mine. "And you?" she asked softly. "What's your role in all this?" I looked down at my hands, the scales a constant reminder of what I had become. I'm living proof that we can resist their influence. I'm going to use that to our advantage. I'll infiltrate their ranks, discover their plans, and sabotage their operations from within. Elena nodded, understanding and concern mixed in her gaze. "It's dangerous," she murmured. "It's necessary," I replied, trying to convey a confidence I didn't entirely feel. The helicopters were almost upon us now. It was time to leave. "Good luck," said Elena, shaking my hand one last time before turning to lead her group into the safety of the dense forest. I watched as my companions disappeared into the vegetation, each carrying a vital piece of the puzzle we needed to put together to save humanity. Then, taking a deep breath, I turned to face the approaching helicopters. It was time to dive back into the world of the Reptilians, this time as a double agent. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of frenetic activity. Using my hybrid status as a cover, I managed to infiltrate a low-level reptilian cell. Each day was a dangerous dance of lies and half-truths, always fearing that my true loyalties would be discovered. I learned more about the reptilian hierarchy, their advanced technologies and their long-term plans for Earth. It was a nightmare of cosmic proportions, but every bit of information I managed to pass on to Elena and the others was a small victory. Meanwhile, the world outside remained largely ignorant of the secret war going on in the shadows. But there were signs that the truth was beginning to come out. Conspiracy theories were gaining traction, scientists were beginning to question unexplained anomalies, and reports of sightings of reptilian creatures were increasing exponentially. It was during a high-level meeting of the Reptilian Cell that I had my biggest breakthrough. They were planning a large-scale event, something they called the Great Awakening. It was a plan to reveal their existence to the world once and for all, using a combination of mind control technology and demonstrations of power to subjugate humanity in one swift, decisive blow. I knew I had to act fast. Using an ultra-secure communication channel, I transmitted the information to Elena. Her response was immediate. "It's time to gather our forces. The final confrontation is coming." Over the next few weeks, we worked tirelessly, Elena and Dr. Hernandez coordinated a global resistance network, uniting scientists, military dissidents, and ordinary citizens who had discovered the truth. I continued my infiltration, sabotaging critical equipment and planting false information whenever possible. Finally, the day of the Great Awakening arrived. The world's major cities were suddenly flooded with alien transmissions. Reptilian motherships appeared in the skies, and world leaders began making surreal announcements about a new era of interstellar cooperation. But we were ready. The moment the Reptilians activated their mass mind control devices, our global resistance network sprang into action. Frequency jammers, developed on the basis of the information I had collected, were activated all over the world, neutralizing much of the effect of the alien technology. Chaos ensued. Humans and reptilians clashed openly in the streets. It was the moment I had been waiting for. Abandoning my disguise, I joined the battle alongside my true allies. The fight was brutal and bloody. Alien technology against human determination. For days, the fate of the Earth remained uncertain. It was during a particularly fierce battle in Washington, D.C., that I had my final confrontation with Colonel Mendoza. He had survived our last encounter and now led the reptilian forces in the capital. "You're a freak," he shouted as we exchanged blows amid the chaos of battle. "Neither human nor reptilian. You don't belong anywhere." I blocked his attack, my hybrid reflexes giving me a crucial advantage. "You're wrong, Mendoza," I growled. "I belong right here, fighting for humanity." With one swift movement, I managed to disarm Mendoza. He fell to his knees, defeated. "It's over," I declared, pointing my gun at his head. Mendoza laughed, a cold, humorless sound. "It's over. This is just the beginning, Sergeant. We'll always be here, in the shadows, waiting for our chance." I hesitated for a moment, my finger on the trigger. Then I made my decision. "No," I said firmly. "You will face justice, human and reptilian." The battles continued for days, but gradually the tide began to turn in our favor. With their plans exposed and their mind control technology neutralized, the reptilians began to retreat. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity of fighting, silence came. The reptilian motherships disappeared from the skies. The clashes in the streets ceased. Exhausted, I found myself at Elena's side again, watching the sun rise over a battle-torn city. "Did we make it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I looked at the horizon, thinking about everything we had been through, everything that was yet to come. "For now," I answered honestly, "but the real battle is just beginning." Elena nodded, understanding. The world now knew about the existence of the reptilians. Human society would never be the same again. We would have to rebuild, adapt, find a way to coexist with the reality that we were not alone in the universe. And I, neither totally human nor totally alien, would be at the center of it all. A living symbol that coexistence was possible, that we could overcome our differences and work together for a better future. As the sun rose in the sky, illuminating the rubble of battle and the first attempts at reconstruction, I felt a mixture of hope and determination. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but for the first time since I entered that cursed cave, I felt we had a real chance. The war against the reptilians was over. The fight for humanity's survival and evolution was just beginning. And I would be there on the front line, ready to face any challenge the future might bring.